Hello everyone, and today we are back with another passage. This passage is about science. This is different from the historical and the fiction passages because the language is more modern, but at the same time the words are more complicated and the arguments presented, although straightforward, it's a challenge to understand. But in my opinion, the science passages are way easier than the historical ones due to the language. It's just better to understand. The legibility is just more. So with that being said, let's read the passage right now. The first American zoo was established in Philadelphia in 1874, and for most Americans today, zoos figure as positive impositions on the landscape. They preserve many species threatened in their natural habitats by forces such as climate change in the Arctic and the mercenary poaching in Africa, forces that might spell the potential extinction of polar bears and elephants, among others. But this conservatorship that zoos offer also reflects the values of a culture that still privileges a traditional human-centered and human-controlled view of the natural world. As theorized by the American philosopher and intellectual historian A. O. Lovejoy in the 1930s, the so-called Great Chain of Being assumed that man ruled over the entire natural world and, like Adam in the Garden of Eden, was the caretaker of all living things. During the latter half of the 20th century and well into the 21st century, however, this totalizing belief of man's intellectual and physical superiority has been challenged by philosophers, most notably Peter Singer and Kerry Wolf, who argue that animals should enjoy equal status with human beings. As a result, zoos, which have long been considered places of education and amusement, where both children and adults witness tigers in their seemingly natural lair, male lions as nominal heads of their prides, and elephants as friendly companions, are no longer viewed as innocent recreation. Rather, this seemingly innocuous act of just looking at animals constitutes a transgression of fundamental dignity of non-human species who have the right to roam and to make their own decisions regarding their survival, for better or for worse, just as all humans do. As Mary Benbow explains, in late 19th century and early 20th century America, zoos developed in close association with parks and created landscapes infused with middle-class ethos and became civic symbols of city expansion that were therefore also engaged in social reform intended to educate the working and immigrant classes. Educational goals aside, zoos conceived on this model express the principle that humanity controls all nature by ruling over, designating, categorizing, and deciding where all living things belong and how they should subsequently behave. According to Carol J. Adams, zoos present a restricted, imperialistic, supremacist view of the natural world. Zoos are cruel. They inflict pain. Animal captivity therefore is harmful to the captive animal and to the human spectator. Despite these claims that animals are on par with humans, most Americans still view animals in captivity as situated in a cozy environment where they are fed, taken care of, and not exposed to the dangers of the survival of the fittest in the natural world. But is supposed freedom from danger really the yardstick by which quality of life can be measured? Granted, captive animals may in most cases fare better than these artificial conditions, but that doesn't necessarily imply that zoos figure as the most viable venues for continued survival. Zoo elephants, according to People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, have been subjected to a lack of exercise and long hours standing on hard surfaces. Such conditions have contributed to foot problems and arthritis, which are the leading reasons why captive elephants are euthanized. Many die decades short of their expected lifespan. The question of whether zoos are productive or destructive institutions is symptomatic of large issues concerning the way human beings have historically treated the environment. Even after experiencing a growing number of natural catastrophes over the past several years, much of the world has still not taken substantial measures to allay the problems with man's relation to nature. The series of droughts, floods, and forest fires, as well as the continuous strip mining of the globe, attest to the fact that man still confronts his environment with a kind of hostile aggression. While many Americans balk at the thought that animals possess the self-determination of human beings, those who question the role and benefits of modern zoos suggest ways of thinking sympathetically about the natural world that can help the earth to heal itself. So that was the passage. So first, after we have read the passage, what do we need to do? We need to find the main idea. This passage is talking about zoos and whether they are good or not, or the animals in there good, or they being held captive against nature, right? So, in the first paragraph, the author does which of the following? A. Concedes that zoos may have some ecological benefits. B. Explain why zoos have often been criticized. Implies that zoo will only continue to grow in popularity, and cites a philosopher who wrote about the earliest American zoos. Now, what is the obvious reason? The obvious answer that is wrong here. We read the first American zoo was established here, and today positive impositions on the landscape, and but this conservatorship also reflects the values as stereotyped by American philosopher. Okay, so B is never mentioned. C is never mentioned, so C is out. Now we see cites a philosopher who wrote about the earliest American zoos. So apparently there is a philosopher here, right? A.O. Lovejoy, but does he write about zoos? No, he wrote about the great chain of being, assuming that man ruled over the entire natural world. So he didn't write about zoos. So D is wrong, as well as C. Now, explain why zoos have often been criticized. The author criticizes zoo a bit, right? But it does not explain why zoos often get criticized. It doesn't even mention criticism at all, other from the author. So that option is wrong. That leaves us with A, right? Concedes that zoos have some ecological benefits. What supports that answer? So I told you to eliminate, but you might want to find supporting evidence. Here, just they preserve many species threatened in their natural habitats by forces such as climate change or mercenary poaching. So that is some ecological benefits of zoos. 43. The function of the information provided as theorized things. Now, as theorized by the American philosopher and intellectual. So until here, what is the function of that? To introduce a historical figure, to summarize an argument, to provide background, to imply that his theory is wrongly interpreted. Now, to introduce a historical figure, this part talks about the great chain of being, right? And the passage focus is not a biography, so introducing is wrong. Summarize an argument that zookeepers often use to defend their practices. So you may mistake this great chain of man ruling over the entire natural world as a summary of an argument, but it does not mention zookeepers using this great chain of being as an argument, or even zookeepers in general. So that option is obviously wrong. C. Provide background for a belief. So if you see here, but this conservatorship that zoos offer also reflects the values of culture that still privileges a traditional human view of the world, which is man ruling over the entire natural world. And if you look here, zoos are restricted, and questions whether zoos are productive or destructive institutions, right? And while many Americans pocket the thought that animals possess the self-determination of human beings, that implies that the author does not like zoos at all. So C may be correct, but we still need to look at D. Imply that Lovejoy's theory has been interpreted wrongly? No, it just explains the theory, so C is correct. According to the author, the Americans overwhelmingly view the act of keeping animals in the zoo, so we need to find where the American public is mentioned. I guess that's me being as a result. Therefore, here it is. Despite these claims that animals are on par with humans, most Americans still view animals in captivity as situated in a cozy environment. So, we need to look. Controversial? Is it cozy? No. Harmless? Cozy is better than harmless. Economically empowering? No, that's not cozy. And philosophically unquestionable? That's just plain irrelevant. So harmless is the correct answer. Which choice? Now, there are often these evidence questions, like you are asked to answer and you are asked for the evidence. So I think this is the best strategy, is to read the evidence first and then answer this question, because you read these questions and you some of these, this is right, I don't know which one is correct, so I read these, I get confused, and I spend like 5 minutes. No, read these first, and there I just answered 2 questions at the same time. So see, despite these, the Americans still will blah blah, right? 2 correct questions, and the other way around is not guaranteed. As used, preserve mostly means preserve. Where is it though? Search. Okay. They preserve many species threatened in their natural habitat. So we know that preserve there is used with its original meaning, which is safeguard. This does not need elimination because it's used in the original meaning. The author would most likely argue that debates surrounding zoos are important because zoos can foster character traits. Organizations that oppose zookeeping practice are growing in popularity. Zoos are oblivious to the pain, and attitudes towards zoos are relevant to broader concerns. Now, don't read these. Read the evidence, right? As a result, recreation. As a result, zoos, which have been considered a place where both children friendly companions are no longer viewed as innocent creation. No, this just says that zoos are place of education. But is it supposed to measure? But it's supposed for freedom from danger, really the yardstick by which equality of life can be measured. This seems very tempting, right? But we'll leave it there for now. That could be correct. Zoo elephants, let's see. Zoo elephants, I think they talks about diseases, right? Zoo elephants often subjected to a lack of exercise and long hours, which many die short of their expected lifespan. This says about the elephants, but it also implies that zoos are kind of bad in general, but it does not. That the debate surrounding zoos, remember, it is not asking about zoos, it is asking about why we are debating about zoos, right? So C could be right. Animal cruelty, let's see. D, the question of whether zoos are productive or destructive institutions is symptomatic of larger issues concerning the way human beings have historically treated the environment. The question. Do you notice it? These are like very vague. As a result, creation elephants, they talk about what's happening in the zoos, but not about the debate itself. D say that the question of whether zoos are good or bad relates to our view of the environment. And so, obviously, if we cross-reference it up here, zoos can force the character traits. That correlates to A, but that does not talk about the debate. Organizations, this is simply irrelevant, not mentioned. Zoos are oblivious to the pain. It might sound like it relates to C, but it doesn't. They don't mention that zoos are oblivious, they say that they cause them, not oblivious to the pain. So only D is left, and D is supported by here. So we got 2 questions correct, just by reading one. As used have contributed to such conditions have contributed to food problems and arthritis. And so, as we intelligent test takers, what is it? It's B, are responsible for. Everything else is wrong. You should be able to spot the correct answer immediately if you are well versed in vocabulary. The quotations of Mary Benbow and Carol J. Adams. So we need to read them, right? Mary Benbow say that zoos develop in close association with parks and middle-class ethos. They were engaged in social reform intended to educate the working and immigrant classes, while J. Adams says zoos present a restricted, imperialistic, supremacist view of the natural world. Animal captivity is therefore harmful to the captive and to the human. So one is explaining that zoos are evidence of the growth of society along with parks and protecting the education of the middle and immigrant classes, while Carol J. Adams criticizes zoo for the captivity of animals. So basically that's the main idea of those statements, right? So explains the origins of the feature, while Adams offer harsh criticisms. Focus on how zoos impact the animal that they house. Mary does not say this. B is wrong. In a case where zoos original most popular, no, she just says that why zoos were there. Defends modern zoos? No, he just says the purpose. A is left with elimination. But you see it, explain the origin, right? The origin of zoos is like the education of the American public. And yeah, Adams is harsh criticisms. That is very spot on. 51, we have a graph. Which choice is supported by data? We need to by data, sorry. A, the number of Americans who view zoos favorably is greater than the number of those who view zoos unfavorably. View is greater than view favorably. People who view zoos with indifference are less likely to visit zoos. People who view zoos unfavorably are more likely to visit zoos. Now we need here primary perspective of Americans towards zoos. Favorably the most, unfavorably a little bit, very small, indifferently smallest. Now, first figure, see? So favorably the most, unfavorably the least, and indifferently, 10%. So these are out. They have no statistic on the likelihood of visiting zoos with regard to opinion. But the number of Americans who view zoos favorably is greater, see? Greater, 72%, while unfavorably is about 20%, and that is greater. A is correct. Taken together, the two figures suggest that the greatest number of Americans view zoos. We see favorably is the greatest, so that gives us A and C, because B and D is unfortunately eliminated because they say unfavorably. So we look at the second part of the sentence, because of the entertainment value, or because animals are considered safer in captivity. Now we need to look at the second graph. Animals in safer captivity, largest, general amusement, 13%. So what is it? It's obviously C, because favorably here and safer in captivity here. Okay, that is everything I have for today. Thanks for watching and see you guys later.